Hello and welcome to this briefing by the Jerusalem Press Club. I am Jonathan Beck, Director of Content, and this is our first Zoom briefing of the year 2025. Our guest today is Zafrir Asaf, an expert in international development and the impact economy and an expert in macroeconomics. And our topic is the Israeli economy in a general view, 15 months into the war, but also more specifically in relation to the attacks of the Houthis in Yemen over the past few weeks. First, a few words about our guest. Zafrir is chairman of the Society for International Development, SID Israel, and serves on the board of the Israeli Forum for Impact Economy. From 2011 to 2016, he headed Israel's economic and trade mission to Vietnam, and he was also the director of emerging markets and development at the Development Finance Department in Israel's Ministry of Economy and Industry. Hello, Zafrir, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for inviting me. It's great being here.
Thank you. So I would like to begin with the Houthi attacks, not only because these are the last remaining active military threat against Israel at the moment, but because the economic damage from them is not exactly direct and maybe not immediately perceptible. People speak of the cost of interception, for example, the cost of an arrow missile, or the costs of damage when something is damaged or broken, or in worst cases even physical injuries. But there's also the issue of these rockets being targeted at the economic heart of the country and basically disrupting the economy, even if they are intercepted because people wake up late, they have more car accidents, physicians are tired in hospitals, etc. Um, can you discuss this aspect and also maybe you know compare it to the disruption from rockets to the other areas of Israel during the war?
Sure. Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity. I don't see the audience due to the limitations of the platform, but do feel free to jump in and ask questions and guide me to the issues and themes that of interest to you.
I'll certainly relay questions as they come.
Thank you. And I will start with the Houthis, but I'll expand or broaden the perspective because I think the Houthi attacks cannot be taken in isolation. They don't stand alone, and they don't affect the economy directly, but they severely affect the economy indirectly. So starting with the direct effects, well, I don't know how many of you reside in Israel and have to get up in the middle of the night and run to shelter. So you probably understand the immediate effects on professionals and people, especially on children who may be traumatized. It has some effect. To date, there hasn't been a direct hit on major economic infrastructure, and that's important to notice. You probably know that most of the critical infrastructure in the country is heavily protected by Iron Dome and other systems. That they may even be prioritized over other areas. But the truth of the matter is that no significant economic infrastructure has been hit. Not the airport, power plants, transportation systems, electricity, energy, water, or any other. And that's true for the Houthi attacks as well as the attacks by Hamas following October 7th, and most of the attacks by Hezbollah, with a bit of small exception for some of the infrastructure up in the north, which has an effect, but not major effect on the economy. The Houthi attacks did hit certain buildings. The main one, as you may recall, is a school in Ramat Gan about a week and a half ago, which will have to be rebuilt. It's a public expenditure of a few millions of dollars. But all in all, the fact that no economic infrastructure has been hit significantly minimized the economic effects of the direct economic effects of Houthi attacks, as well as other attacks on Israel. However, at the same time, the main context of the Houthi attack is the uncertainty that they create alongside the continuous fighting in Gaza. And this also needs to be mentioned. Jonathan said that basically we have one front left, which is not exactly accurate. The West Bank, 3 active fronts, and less active fronts also in the north and in Syria. So there is quite a lot of fighting still going on. I just read statistics from yesterday or on Friday that since the killing of Yahya Sinwar in October, over about 85 Israeli soldiers died in combat. So, and that's been 2.5 months or so. So that's a significant number. That's not a number that could be taken for granted. And it means that fighting continues. And the Houthi attacks basically convey a message that the fighting is still going on, the war is still going on, and that has major implications on multiple fronts. First of all, it creates a major uncertainty. And I think that's the main characteristic of Israeli economy going into 2025. We don't know what's going to happen. And very few people know or have solid understanding of what may or might come. The uncertainty is at every level, from the strategic level of we don't really know what Trump's policies towards Israel and the conflict in the Middle East going to be. Is he going to wind down the fighting? Is he going to be fully supportive of Israel? Is he going to be tired of Israel and force it to enforce a ceasefire with or without the return of the hostages? We don't know what would be the effects of Trump's trade measures on Israel. He already said that he will impose tariffs on friendly countries, not only on China. The US makes about almost 30% of Israeli exports. So what would be the implications of higher US tariffs on Israeli companies? And the cost of fighting. So at the moment, most of the reservists are being discharged. As I said, the hitting or the Houthi missiles do not hit significant economic targets at the moment, but that could change overnight. Same goes for the fighting in Gaza and the fighting in Lebanon. The ceasefire is in place, but Israeli soldiers are still on Lebanese soil, and the Israeli retreat should be completed in about a month or a month and a half from now. And it's unclear if it will be completed in time and what would be the implications if it's not. What would be Hezbollah's ability to resume fighting with Israel. So we are facing extreme uncertainty, and the Houthi attacks exaggerate this uncertainty. They keep reminding us and the world that the fighting is still on. It has major implications for investment in Israel, which has, according to some statistics, declined. According to Ministry of Finance, remained pretty much more or less the same as 2023. But obviously, every foreign investor looking, reading the news coming from Israel would keep hearing about Houthi missiles being shot at Israel. Tourism and aviation, one of the industries that was hit severely over the past 14 months of conflict. No airline is going to return to Israel as long as the Houthis are shooting every 2 days at Ben Gurion Airport. Same goes for tourists, of course. And not to mention the trade routes in the Red Sea that are also affected by the conflict with Houthis. Some ships heading to Israel have to make a detour and make the cost of shipping even higher. So the conflict with the Houthis, though, is not hurting Israel severely from economic perspective is definitely felt.
Okay, thank you very much for this detailed introduction. I just want to correct myself when I said before the Houthis are their last remaining threat. That was words that I wrote last week before Hamas kind of apparently in the general atmosphere of perhaps a deal is firing more rockets from Gaza. But I meant that a massive amount of rockets from Gaza is no longer on the table. You mentioned the issue of infrastructure in Israel. In those attacks from Yemen, a huge, they call them polygons of Jewish communities are running to the shelters. But from the little that we know, it doesn't look like they're actually trying to attack infrastructure facilities, but mostly military bases. I think, I mean, I'm not even sure what the intentions of the Houthis are in the sense of what they want to achieve, apart from supporting their brothers in Gaza, so to speak. But you mentioned the uncertainty, and I was also referring to a simple fact of, an immediate, and I don't know if it's measurable, but a loss of productivity in the market, basically because of a tired workforce. Um, while this may seem kind of anecdotal, I think it's got like an accruing effect that grows bigger. Um, can you discuss for a second the costs of rebuilding the North and also
Sure, sure. Yeah, I agree with you, Jonathan, that there is hidden, let's say, quote unquote, cost to the Houthi attacks, even if it doesn't hit economic infrastructure directly. We need to keep in mind, maybe the audience need to keep in mind that many, and the numbers are still being researched. Many Israelis have been traumatized over the past 14 months, either directly as they've been part of the incidents, whether in the north or in the south or in the center, and also indirectly losing friends, losing members of family, being under stress for multiple sirens. And every night that our people are being waken up by a Houthi missile, enlarges and makes that trauma worse. It's too early to say or to calculate the economic effect of that trauma, but it definitely has an impact and will have an impact. As to your second question about infrastructure, so again, the numbers vary depending on who you ask and what is calculated as part of repairing the damage in the south and in the north. We are looking at tens of billions of shekels or billions of dollars in direct repairs and fixing infrastructure and rebuilding infrastructure, and including full rebuilding of some of the communities that have been border communities, both in the Gaza border and as well as in the Lebanese border, that have been practically destroyed by over the past year. And we see the effects in the recent budget that was approved by the government and will be approved by the Knesset. Basically, Israelis are now obliged to say are taxed on every corner, as we say, every single element of. So we pay extra VAT. Some of the government allowances have been cut. We'll pay more for electricity. We'll pay more for water. We'll pay more for municipal taxes, and all of those additional taxes or higher taxes aimed at rebuilding the north, the south, and paying for the war effort. And that's a major effect, and it ties into the element of uncertainty, where we don't really know how it will affect Israeli people livelihoods in the coming year and beyond. We recently, about a month ago, the recent poverty figures have been published. There is a discrepancy between the official numbers published by the National Social Security and non-official numbers that are published by other researchers, but they all range around 30%. So meaning 30% of Israelis live in poverty, and that's before the taxes of 2025. And that's
What was the statistic before the war? Maybe, you know.
So again, the effect of the war is not yet calculated because the figures are up to end of 2023. So they include the months following October 7th, but they don't include 2024 as of yet. And again, the effect of poverty is seen at a later time. It takes time for people to go under the official poverty line because they take loans, because they get help from family and friends, because they scale down their business if they had one, because they live off social security benefits like unemployment payment. Unemployment runs for about half a year. So if somebody lost his or her job in June, he will not get paid, but he will not get unemployment benefits only in January 2025. So it's too early to see, but the numbers are compelling. Israel ranks second from last in OECD in terms of poverty of its population. Only Costa Ricans are poorer according to OECD, and that is before the increase in taxes that we're witnessing now. So we should expect numbers to grow, and then the question is, what will it do to the economy in terms of consumption, in terms of private spending? So far, the government has been spending a lot of money, and that boosted growth to a certain extent, even though growth wasn't really impressive this year. But going into 2025, and if the war winds down in a way, and government is paying less money to reservists and spending less on defense, it's unclear what will boost growth in Israel, since public spending is going to shrink, government spending is going to shrink, and the inflation is going to rise due to the increased taxes.
Okay. Can you tell me, when you speak of this uncertainty, can you tell me about I'm not sure about the names, but the ratings agencies, Moody's, and I think the other one was S&P, that's downgraded Israel. Can you tell me how that ties into it? I mean, in the sense of, do the downgrades like feed the uncertainty or the other way around? And also, for example, for tech investors, which are a community that has kind of its own ideas, to what degree do they maybe ignore the ratings agencies and invest anyway, or to what degree they may change their mind because of a downgrading rating?
Israel had witnessed the first downgrade in its history, downgrade of credit rating in its history, and it had seen 5 of them over the past year, by multiple rating agencies. The direct implication of a lower credit rate is basically paying more for your debt. So the Israeli government, like any government, raises money in global financial markets. It has to pay interest rate. That interest rate is gonna go up because of the downgrade of the credit rating, meaning that over time there will be less available funding for public services. Plain and simple. So you can only imagine what happens to a household that pays more for every single service, but also enjoy less healthcare, less education, less investment in infrastructure, and so on. That is the direct implication. Uh, Beyond that, obviously, it's another hint. It ties into the uncertainty, and it ties into the headlines, and it ties into the image of global image of Israel. And when money and when investors are thinking where to invest, I'd say that they need better reasons now to invest in Israel than 2 years ago, because most of the news coming out of this country over the past year or two has been quite negative. And it does reflect on the soundness and the strength of Israeli economy, Israeli high tech, mainly high tech, because investments keep coming. Not at the pace and the size and the magnitude that we'd seen in the past, but it's still coming in. But obviously, it's a tougher stretch for investors, mainly investors in tech and in real assets. It's easier to invest in financial assets because it's much easier to pull the money out if uncertainty grows or if the conflict escalates. But it does have significant effect on investment in real assets. Not necessarily direct to the war. Obviously, we're experiencing kind of a global slowdown in Europe, in China, pretty much everywhere except for the United States in 2024. And that also has an effect on the will and the excitement about investing in Israel.
Okay, thank you for this. I'm going to move now to a question from a reporter. He asks this: there is a strong rationale to justify a coalition to deal with the Houthis instead of Israel fighting them alone, because the Houthis' impact is global. So therefore, there should be a sharing of the burden. Do you agree to this? And if yes, then why do you think this is not happening yet?
It's a question more on the political realm. Obviously, there is a rationale for a global or a regional coalition. To best of my knowledge, there is some kind of coordination between Israel, the United States, UK, and regional powers to some extent. I think the more interesting question is how do these ad hoc partners that I just mentioned build upon this partnership, build upon this coordination towards something that's bigger and more strategic than military cooperation. I think the key or the main path forward for the region is more economic cooperation, more cooperation between businesses and between people that would provide a solid base for military cooperation. If we look at the figures, again, and I mentioned that many countries now face economic challenges and political challenges, France and Germany and others. It's going to be quite hard to build a coalition like the coalition we'd seen in the 1990s when with the first war with Iraq, with Saddam Hussein's Iraq. I don't see that coming. And we have to keep in mind that the challenge to trade routes that is affecting the Red Sea is disturbing to many, but it's not a critical issue to most economies, except for Egypt, which had seen almost 50% decline in revenue from the Suez Canal. It's a major problem, but it's not a big enough or not an immediate enough problem to mobilize Western governments that are facing tremendous challenges at the moment.
Okay, I see. Thank you for this. It's really a puzzle why Egypt is not doing more. We've been discussing this in past webinars. I would like to ask about January 20th. You mentioned those three goalposts. Now we know that President-elect Donald Trump, in his former term, let's say, much preferred economic warfare and tariffs and taxes, etc., to real warfare. And he actually even used those measures also against some friends of the US. But do you think Israel specifically might be a target of tariffs or customs? Because has there been any indication that Israel, Israel is not part of NATO. It doesn't have the claim against Israel that it's not sharing its part in paying for NATO. So do you see that coming?
These are two. I think we look at two different issues. The NATO or the military cooperation. I actually don't know, because if you try to analyze President-elect's policies, he's basically calling for less involvement, less US involvement in global affairs. What does that mean for Israel? I don't think anybody knows. His first term, President Trump led the region to signing the Abraham Accords, which was a kind of groundbreaking initiative. But it was relatively simple compared to the political and geopolitical challenges of today, with the Saudis saying very clearly that they will not move towards normalization without a clear path to solving the Palestinian issue. And it's unclear how much Trump will be busy with domestic issues like immigration and growth and others, and how much time and patience will he have to deal with the Middle East. So that's on the military front. On the tariff and trade front, yeah, again, I'm not with the government anymore, but I think it would be unwise for Israel to ignore this threat. And I think if the Europeans are concerned, and if the Mexicans and the Canadians are concerned, Israel shouldn't sit idle, because tariffs in the US and making America policies will undoubtedly affect Israel. As I said, about 30% of Israeli exports of goods and services go to the US. There are hundreds and hundreds of Israeli companies that work in the US and have the US as their main market. And I think every Israeli company and the Israeli government have to be ready. And we need to keep in mind that Israel's trade policy for the past 30, 40 years has been mostly bilateral. So we would negotiate trade deals with every trade partner separately, whereas other countries gather in blocks, whether it's ASEAN and the Southeast Asian countries that have regional trade agreements with the US, with China, and with others, whether it's obviously the European, even the Africans are moving towards an African trade agreement. There are very few countries in the world that are not part of a trade bloc, whether it's a loose one or like ASEAN or a full-fledged one like the European Union. And that puts Israel in a delicate position, going into a more protectionist trade system.
Because what? Because Israel is not a member of any club in that sense.
Because our leverage power is smaller. Because if you negotiate on behalf of yourself, it's true that you are more flexible and you have maybe a bit of a maneuvering flexibility than a country that works within a bloc, but a bloc has a bigger leverage over its main trading partners, and that's a vulnerability for Israel, and that leads me maybe to another point that I think the reporters should keep in mind. Part of the indirect effects of the war has been a shift in attention. And if we look at the approved budget and we look at Israeli government policies, we see that many critical issues like climate change have been put on hold. Israel has yet to pass a climate law, and even the law that is being discussed is kind of a lame duck, to be honest. Israel is slow to move on issues related to ESG. It's slow to move on its relations with emerging markets, which offer the biggest growth potential for growth in the coming years. And much of that has been put on hold because the government has been focused on the war and on the domestic political turmoil, and that will have major effects moving forward on the competitiveness of Israeli industry, on Israel's ability to respond to changing patterns in global economy and trade. And I think this is also need to be taken into consideration. We move into 2025 being relatively strong, even surprisingly strong, but major uncertainty is looming over and challenges as well.
Okay, I understand. Thank you for this. I want to ask a last question that kind of ties two things together. During the war, during the past 15 months, it was this U.S. administration, not the coming one, that once or twice, let's say, used arms shipments as a leverage point towards Israel. Do you think, in the grand scheme of things, we can expect something like a local industry of tank shells, artillery shells? I'm not talking about, the more niche production of UAVs, which are high tech, but recently Israel signed an agreement with Serbia to buy, munitions from it. Do you think Israel might consider increasing the local heavy industry also in order to beef up the local economy and solve this problem of being dependent on other countries?
First of all, I'm sure it does. Again, many of the figures are confidential, but Israel is boosting its local capacity. It has a business. It makes not only military sense, reducing the dependency of in foreign imports of arms, but also makes economic sense because it is expected that European nations will boost their military and defense expenditure in the coming years. So they will, whatever capacity Israel produces, there will probably be a market in the short run. I personally have sincere question, or I'm hesitant about it because I'm not sure that making Israel the arms tech nation rather than the startup nation is a sound policy direction. Obviously, we need to be less dependent on other countries for our arms and defense systems, but that has to be balanced with building other industries. And Israel has tendency to inflate its defense budgets to very big numbers, and that takes a toll on civil services, on infrastructure, on everything that boosts growth. So unfortunately, I'm not sure there is enough political will to kind of push the brakes on the defense industry. And I think that we're going to pay a price for that in 5 to 10 years' time, because we will find ourselves with a very big defense industry, with shrinking or diminishing demand, and with an industry that has limited spillover effect into other areas of the economy. The defense industry is not the tech industry. It does not operate in the same way. It's not the same cycles. It's not the same knowledge that is required. And the belief that if we will boost defense industry, we'll see the same results as if we boosted the high-tech industry, I think are not based, and I'm sincerely worried about this trend.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. Not 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 a very optimistic note for the end of this briefing, but we've run out of time by now. I want to thank you very much, Zafir, for your time. The reporters here, I'll give them your number if they have any more questions. We didn't delve into the deeper issues of, macro effects of demographics in Israel, but that's going to be for a later briefing. This will be on our YouTube channel by this afternoon, hopefully. And I would like to thank Matya Sakal and Iman Safadi, who technically assisted this webinar coming to be. Thank you so much again for your time, Safir.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm available over the phone for follow-up questions as well as on LinkedIn.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you.